to speak to you today as a millennial. As a millennial, people tell me I just don't understand. That these problems I see are more nuanced and complex. That they take time. They take patience. But I know that just because things have been this way, just because things are the way they are, does not mean that's how they have to stay. I know that if we want our world to conform to our values, then we will likely have to upset industries, probably have to forge new paths, and can't simply rely on the structures and systems that existed for our parents and those who came before them. I know that often the greatest obstacle to the evolution of our planet is the simple human aversion to change. As long as we are more attached to what is known, to the certainty of our experience, than to the uncertainty of possibility, then progress will remain elusive. I want to speak to you today as a millennial who is feeling heartsick, disappointed, and challenged. As a millennial, I pride myself on being up to date with all the social justice issues of our time. I pride myself on being forward-thinking, making the right choices, taking the right stands. But over these past weeks, watching the murder of George Floyd, watching hundreds of thousands of people take to the streets to protest, I had to admit I had failed. True, I did not kneel on George Floyd's neck, but I was complicit. I knew and have known the endemic racism which underpins our criminal justice system. I knew about Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, and countless others who have tragically lost their lives to police brutality. I knew that Black American men are more than 5 times more likely than white American men to be incarcerated, meaning that something like 1 in 4 Black American men will spend time behind bars, often for crimes that their white counterparts will walk away from with a light slap on the wrist. I knew about systemic injustice, the kind of racism that infects and affects every area of life, from the most serious to employment opportunities and experience in the workplace, to seemingly trivial aspects of life, like who gets served first in a restaurant and how many responses your comments receive on a dating app. I knew, and yet I did nothing. I somehow accepted that injustice is an inherent quality in our world, a quality that, though distasteful, can never be fully erased. I did nothing. And so I was complicit. We were complicit. How is it that we, a people who have been oppressed for thousands of years, a people who have been the victim of discriminatory policies, the victims of state-sanctioned violence, how is it that we remained silent? How is it that we, a people who claim to never forget, fail to remember our own experiences when they would be most salient. As protests quiet in our country, as people go back to their lives, as we go back to our lives, we cannot allow things to return to the way they were before. We have seen the light, and even more, we have seen the darkness. Because of our identity as Jews, because of our history and our values, because the moral integrity of our country rests on our shoulders, we must speak out for justice and continue to work for righteous change. This morning, I want to share with you a powerful text from the Talmud, a text I first learned from a friend and colleague, Rabbi Jordan Bronig. It comes to us from the beginning of Bava Batra. The rabbis are discussing the protocol for building a synagogue. The sages all agree. You cannot simply demolish a synagogue. Instead, you must build a new synagogue before you can take down the old one. It makes sense. It's good logic. After all, it's not fair to take away a structure that people depend upon without first creating a substitute. But our rabbis teach there's one exception to this rule. If a synagogue has cracks, if that building is unsound and therefore unsafe, then you must tear it down before building a replacement. This text calls out to us so clearly in this moment. The United States of America was built as a sanctuary for freedom, justice, and equality. Our national collective consciousness prays at the altar of democracy. Our foundational texts extol the belief that all deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yet we've seen over these past weeks that there are cracks in our sanctuary. The principled foundations on which we stand can no longer hold us. We must build anew. And you might say, no, it's not safe to tear down the synagogue. People are depending on it. Gradual, incremental change would be better, would be safer, would be preferable. We must turn to our sages. We cannot continue to pray in a sanctuary which endangers its members. Our walls are cracked. Let me give you an example. Lest you say this happens in Minneapolis or New York or Florida or Georgia, but not here. Days ago, Tim Duncan, the former deputy athletic director at Northeastern, was spending time with his wife at home when they decided they'd like to walk from their home in Newton to the Whole Foods on Washington Street. They left their home, and within only a few minutes, they were surrounded by 4 police cruisers staring down the barrel of a drawn gun. The police, when they saw him, had radioed in, "We see a party that matches the description of the party we're looking for." In other words, they were looking for a black man and saw a black man walking. Thankfully, Tim was not killed, but he and his wife were placed in mortal danger simply because of the color of their skin here in Newton, walking distance from this shul. How can we stand by while innocent people are swarmed by armed police simply for walking while black? How can we stand by as justice is perverted on our doorsteps? The walls of our sanctuary have cracked. The principled foundations on which we stand are rotting from the inside out. We must dismantle racism and oppression. We must build anew. In the Talmud, the rabbis tell a story of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi one day noticed that the walls of his synagogue were cracked. Rav Ashi was a faithful man, and so he demolished that synagogue immediately. But then he went and grabbed his mattress and dragged it out to the demolition site. He slept there, in the rain and in the cold. He slept there until they had built a new synagogue, waiting even until they affixed the drain pipes before dragging his mattress home to sleep inside. When Rabbi Jordan Bronig taught this text years ago in the Hebrew College Beit Midrash, he asked us to think about what are the social justice issues that would inspire you to drag your mattress out into the cold. It's one thing to say you're in favor of justice and equality. Another entirely to put your body and your life on the line for it. Today, I can't help but wonder what could be if we were willing to do just this. For too long, we have prayed in sanctuaries with cracked walls. For too long, we have clung to structures and systems of oppression because we are too nervous for change. For too long, we have stood by, witnessing racism, inequality, discrimination, injustice. It's time for us to leave the comfort of our homes. It's time for us to drag our mattresses out, to stand together in the places where the values of our nation are being destroyed. It's time for us to stand together, to demand that we tear down systems of oppression and rebuild a world in which all can thrive, free from fear, free from injustice, a world in which we are no longer complicit. What if, for example, any time a black person were pulled over by police, white people stopped their cars, got out of their cars, and stood by as allies in solidarity? What if we made it our business every time we went shopping? Every time we saw a black person or a minority person being tailed in a department store, what if we made it our business to speak out? What if we filed reports, demanded justice? What if we demanded not only that our schools implement bully-proofing curriculum for our children, but also that every place of employment, every business be mandated to offer racial awareness training, implicit bias workshops? What if we camped out in our government representatives' yards until we were sure that every single person in this country were afforded the right to vote? Our nation has reached a turning point. The moral integrity of our country rests on our shoulders. Just because things are the way they are does not mean that's how things remain. Once upon a time, movies could only be watched in theaters, then only rented in stores. Now everyone streams. We can change. Once upon a time, groceries were grown in the ground and then only purchasable in stores, and now Instacart and delivery services dominate. We can change. Once upon a time, Communal davening took place in person. Now everything is digital. We can change. Once upon a time, you had to go out on the street to hail a taxi. Now you just pull out your phone, open an app. We can change. Once upon a time, there were colored water fountains, and Jewish children couldn't swim with their non-Jewish friends in public pools. We can change. We can change. But will we?